them no good blues. They come and they go, but you know, when they're knocking on your door, I'm in my room on the floor, with my albums and cassettes playing music at its best. Them no good blues. Them no good blues. Oh, feeling in my bones and my shoes like a jackhammer in my mind. Yeah, I swear the last headache you'll never make them no good blues. Them no
good, everybody. Thanks for being here. Many of you I think I saw last night. What a roll. I am not going to introduce our speaker. You're going to, Gay. Yes, but I'm going to tell a story first about how I first met our speaker. And we're trying to remember the exact year, but it's in the distant past, maybe 15 years ago. I was running Bay State Health Systems, Psychiatric Services, and we had a program called Panel Rounds. Did anybody ever go to Panel Rounds in this room? You did. Great. Did you ever see Deborah at Panel Rounds? Don't know. I hope you enjoyed Panel Rounds. But at Panel Rounds, we used to bring people from around the country, and they would speak, and then we would have a panel of other clinicians in the community, and we would work together. And so I got to know Deborah, and actually invited her to spend the night at my house. And then we were going to go on a tour of, I live in Amherst, Massachusetts. We were going to go tour the Emily Dickinson house. Now, I went to Amherst College. You'd think I would know where the Emily Dickinson house was. Well, I went to a house that I, for years, since I left Amherst 40-some-odd years earlier, thought was the Emily Dickinson's house. We wanted to try to get in, and it really wasn't the Emily Dickinson house. So it was a little embarrassing, but that's how I first got to know Deborah and realized what a sensitive, smart, compassionate person she was, who was interested in history and psychiatry and community. And so you have here a person who cares about community, cares about the interface of history and community. And you're going to hear that story, many, many good stories tonight about how she works with people in the homeless systems in Philadelphia. So Gay, I'll turn it back over to you. But Deborah, it's nice to see you again. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm so thrilled to see all of you out here. You know, about 4 o'clock, I was going, there's nobody that's going to come, you know. But anyway, it's really nice to see all of you here. About a year and a half ago, Deborah and I started a conversation about her coming to the retreat, and she's actually making a presentation to the in the continuing education program. I should start this by saying, my name is Gay Maxwell, and I'm the manager of the continuing education program. So one of the things I do is I find speakers like Deborah. And so we started having a conversation, and she was going to come up and do a presentation. She is on the psychotherapy of couples. Well, she happened to mention in passing that her passion is really in working with the homeless. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. And it happened to be, I think at the time, that there had been a lot of articles in the paper about homelessness in Vermont and so forth. And I suddenly thought, well, would you be willing to come up and talk to the community about your experience? Because it just feels to me like, I know October is when the overflow shelter is starting to open up, and it would be a good time to have this dialogue in the community. And she said, yes! And I feel so lucky. So in working with my colleague, Jill Wazani, who is the community relations coordinator here, we thought, well, let's invite people in the community who advocate and serve the homeless, who can serve on a panel and listen to what Deborah has to say, but we can have a talk about this, what it means in Vermont. And Deborah works with the population in Philadelphia, probably very different, probably very much the same. So I'm really excited about this tonight. We have panelists, and I will give more of their bios when we get to that part, but I'm going to also read an introduction about Deborah. So hold on one second, I have to get up there. All right. So, Deborah Anna Luepnitz is on the faculty of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. Before becoming a psychoanalyst, she was trained in family therapy at the Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic by Salvador Minuchin and Carl Whitaker. Wow. That's really impressive, by the way. For the past 30 years, Dr. Luepnitz has lived and worked in West Philadelphia, caring for the neediest members of her community. In 1988, she published The Family Interpreted, a critique of mainstream family therapy that argued for attention to issues of gender, race, and social class. 25 years later, it is still taught in family therapy courses around the world. It is also available on that table back there, but that lovely person who happens to be my daughter is going to be selling books today. And her more recent book, Schopenhauer's Porcupines, describes 5 diverse psychotherapy cases written for a general audience. It has been translated into 6 languages. After years of volunteering with homeless women and men in Philadelphia, Dr. Luepnitz launched IFA, that's short for Insight for All, which connects psychoanalysts in the community willing to work for free with homeless individuals and families now residing in Philadelphia's Project Home. For this work, which is now in its 8th year, Dr. Luepnitz received an award by ISEPP, the International Society for Ethical Psychology and Psychiatry, in 2012. Proceeds from her books go to Project Home in Philadelphia. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Deborah to all of you now.
It's wonderful to be here. It's just very moving to me to see so many people come out to talk about homelessness. I think we're going to start with a video. This will run about 20 minutes. That gives you an idea of Project Home, and then I'll tell you about my little psychotherapy project within Project Home. Ready?
I had just been terminated from a job.
I was completely by myself.
My life was kind of spinning out of control.
Loneliness.
I was extremely depressed.
And using drugs.
Sort of in a dream world, you know.
On that street corner, on that stoop, under that blanket, surrounded by that box, hungry.
It can happen to anybody, because I sure as hell didn't think it was going to happen to me.
I think of homelessness as a disease. And I think that yours, Project Home.
Project Home helps move homeless people in Philadelphia into satisfying, independent lives. It started in 1989 as an idea shared by 2 women, Sister of Mercy Mary Scullion and Joan Dawson McConnon, to create solutions for people on the street. Their scope has broadened over the years.
We have entry-level residences, safe havens, and some single-room occupancy where folks come, and we provide 24-hour support in those residences.
About 10% of Philadelphia's homeless live on the streets of Center City, from 150 to 800 people on any given night. Project Home outreach crews determine what services they need. This is a typical team, with staff outreach worker Jenny O'Donnell and volunteer Victor Scurry.
How are you?
All right, my name's Wanda. I'm homeless. Sometimes I sleep in there.
Do you?
Uh-huh.
Would you rather be sleeping somewhere else?
Yeah, would you give me a quarter or something? I'm homeless. I want a food or something, that's all. Please, would you give me something?
Where do you sleep at during the night?
Sometimes I go in there. Would you help me? I need something to eat, please.
I don't have any money on me.
Nothing expensive. I got 1 quarter.
Do you want to go in somewhere? Or do you want
Not right now. Not right now.
This where you hang around at, Wanda? Wanda.
Yes,
this
I
where you,
want to get something to eat.
This is where you hang around?
Somebody will help me.
Do you go to Gateway during the day?
No, I don't go there. I go to Woman in Change, Sister Mary Scullion.
Okay, do you ever stay there?
Yeah, sometimes.
When's the last time you slept there?
Last night.
Do you want to go back and sleep there tonight?
I can if I want to. If I get there by 9:30, I can go in.
Do you want me to get you back there?
No.
Okay. Are you going to try and get back there?
Yeah.
You know they might have it. They'll probably have a.
Yeah.
And they might have a snack back there. This is often the first step. If they get a relationship going with us, they'll usually end up trusting us enough to come in somewhere. With most people, there comes that point where they're ready to keep going and not look back, and when that point comes, we're there to take them to the door.
Wanda Stafford eventually sought shelter through Project Home. There are many successes. Victor was homeless and is anxious to tell his story.
Because you can change, man. I was sharing with the brother here. I was sitting on one of these benches 7 months ago, man. Yeah? Yep, and someone from the same agency that Jenny's working with now stopped and took me in a place, and you know, I'm loving every minute of it, man. I'm glad that I made a conscious decision to go along and kept the willingness to want to change. And I have to keep that willingness on a daily basis. And things get better, man. You know, I'm living proof of it.
The Project Home residence at 1515 Fairmount Avenue houses 48 formerly homeless people and provides useful services to the surrounding neighborhood. A bookstore, used clothing store, arts and computer workshops, an after-school program for kids, and the Back Home Cafe, where Dennis Griffin is employed.
I was just a plain old nothing. Now, I'm just a plain old cook. Most of them who work here are formerly homeless, and now they live in that Project Home. This place is like a stepping stone from the streets to here and to my own house. And one day I might have it.
Women of Change is, we're a 25-bed safe haven for chronically homeless, chronically mentally ill women who are currently living on the street. So all of our ladies come to us through outreach services that take place within the city of Philadelphia. And they come in with a lot of baggage, a lot of needs.
Women of Change is in Center City, Philadelphia. Women of Change does more than shelter homeless women. It builds self-esteem and promotes good health. Regina Bennett is director of Women of Change, and Carol Parker, a resident.
Being out there on the streets is extremely lonely and traumatic. And I'm sure you can help me with that one, huh, Carol?
I was devastated. I didn't know which way to go. I'll never forget. It was my first Easter by myself. I couldn't get in touch with nobody. I couldn't call my kids. Couldn't call my grandkids. And all I could do was sit up at 30th Street Station by myself, drinking coffee, trying to figure out. I came up in a family, but that wasn't really my family and really my home. I was abused by my mother and my sister, and I didn't get a mother's love. I guess that's why I'm so starving for it now, because I never really got it as a child.
I've seen a lot of the women come in and just take major leaps, and, you know, which said to me that all they really needed was a place to go and somebody to care.
For me, it's been a lifesaver. Some days are bad and some days are good. But basically, Women of Change is Women of Change to really change me. I hope I'll have my place. Hopefully. I'm saving my money. And hopefully keep saving it. Maybe I'll get lucky and find me a nice cheap one-bedroom somewhere.
Like Women of Change, St. Elizabeth's is a safe haven in North Philadelphia for homeless men who are addicted and seeking recovery. Bob Dunlap and T.J. Gibson come from different backgrounds, but they face similar challenges.
This is a problem, you know, that knows no educational or cultural bounds. I mean, I have a college degree. I was in social work and I was a juvenile probation officer. And I used to work for the Housing Authority. So I've been on the other side of the desk. And when it all came crashing down, it's hard to digest. It was a bad time in my life. My father had died, and I was extremely depressed. And my life was kind of spinning out of control.
I was going through a bad marriage, you know, divorce, and that kind of emotionally took me down. And from there, I got caught up in the drug, trying to medicate my feelings. I used to drink a lot, and I almost gave up. But out of all those, God was still holding me, because I wound up here.
It's a serious business. It's about getting your life together. It's about saving your life.
Very serious.
You know, when you've been living that way for so many years, you know, you've alienated so many people, you need to learn, you know, how to love yourself again, because you come in here hating yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they teach you how to love yourself again, how to respect yourself.
But now that I have some strength to go forth and be productive, you know, home is going to be a great thing, to walk in my home with my key in my door and just say, thank you, Jesus, thank you. That's home for me.
Homelessness is a horrifying thing, because it rocks at the very foundation of you. Everything that you've ever been taught or believe in or even read, you know, it just shakes everything.
What are you going to call this one?
And there's no hope.
Just a song. Okay.
My song.
So you need to put your cursor behind.
Why is star coming up? Did I do that right? I suffer from acute depression.
How many more
How many
copies?
copies? I want 4.
Okay.
When I came into contact with Project Home, that was a real blessing for me, because not only did it give me a roof over my head, I could do my mental health and, you know, get my physical health. It allowed me to get myself together. I come here for computer classes. They have adult learning classes and also jobs. So I have a job too now. I have a job. I teach class, art class, and in community. So I mean, I'm on a roll. I'm on a real roll.
Say, like, no matter whether it's a summary offense or a misdemeanor, the fact that people...
For Melinda Weems, training has led to employment, and through Project Home, she's also involved in political advocacy.
I'd like to introduce Melinda Weems from In Community. I was a homeless person, and I need to tell you today that homelessness is really a devastating issue.
They fight for the rights of human rights and any injustices that are being done to us. Not only the homeless people, but the people in the community also. They go to City Hall now. They go right to City Hall. Especially Sister Mary. She don't mess around with it. She goes right down there and let them know, you know.
Okay, and I'd just like to say today that we have alternatives, that there are people here today who are the living proof of what's needed to turn this city around. And what's needed to turn this city around is education, housing, jobs, and health care. And the men and women that sleep on our streets are a prophetic sign that something is radically wrong. Some of the money.
Homelessness is more than an individual's problem. It's rooted in racial discrimination and unfeeling public policies. Project Home's programs and staff support residents like Phyllis Howard, who has made great personal efforts to move toward independence.
But some trouble happened that came into my life, and I became homeless. And I had
At that time, I had a condition that I was hearing voices, and I had a mental disorder that they said was bipolar, and I had to take medication to calm my nerves down and become functional. I ran into Project Home by somebody telling me about Sister Mary Scullion. Here, you cook your own meals. You basically come in when you want to and go when you want to, so it's more independent here. Yeah, I feel better about myself. I have a high self-esteem now. I used to have a very low self-esteem and no self-worth. But now, you know, it's different. I have a life, I have friends, I have colleagues, I have doctors and nurses I see. I have a boss, I have my children. Project Home picked me up and dusted me off pretty much. They like removed all the cobwebs and gave me a little bright future. Yeah.
By offering programs for neighborhood youth and adults, Project Home breaks down the barrier between the formerly homeless and their neighbors. Mike McGee is manager of Our Daily Threads thrift store at 1515 Fairmount.
I suffered from drug and alcohol addiction 4 years ago. I was going from shelter to shelter in the city of Philadelphia and also New Jersey. And I stumbled across a place called St. Elizabeth's, that's St. Eve's on 23rd and Crosskey. I went there with the intention of only staying a few weeks and then moving on as I've been doing for 3 or 4 years. And somehow, through the grace of God, I was able to stay and found somebody I could relate to. And from there, it was just one hill after another. I began to climb and come back, get some of my sanity back, and here I am today. One of the reasons Our Daily Threads is here is so that we can enable people in our neighborhood and people, homeless people, people of every walk of life, to afford clothing and be able to look well when they go out and go to work or school or wherever they need, whatever they need to do. Right now I'm living in the Diamond Street residence. That's a Project Home residence. It's 2 houses, one on each side of the street, and it houses 20 men. We have a strong sense of community in that our neighbors know us, respect us, and we can hold our heads up and walk around, and we have each other to support one another.
Homelessness is just an outward manifestation of a lot of other issues. Poverty, racism, discrimination, despair, drug addiction, all have their root in lack of self-esteem. And the mental illness all mixes together.
Dr. Jim Plum volunteers his time and medical expertise to provide on-site health services for Project Home residents and neighbors like George Manigault.
The new welfare reform that the state has created, a lot of people who really need medical attention, especially in your low-income area, they're not getting it. I think one of the stipulations is for your medical card, you must have employment.
Right.
Some people in this community are unemployable because of either they have a substance abuse problem or they're illiterate and they really can't hold a job.
The Family Medicine Department at Jefferson University Hospital collaborates with Project Home and its neighbors to address community health concerns.
Who gets to decide whether a touch is a good touch or a bad touch?
Yourself, because you don't know, because nobody else knows.
Nobody else knows better than you do, right?
Excuse me.
How's it going to feel if it's a bad touch? How will you know?
How I know? Because I know how it feels. I know how a happy touch feels, and I know how a bad touch feels.
Okay.
Health is, the old English word is to make whole. I mean, what makes an individual whole? It's their blood pressure, but it's their self-esteem, it's their spiritual values, it's their ability to work, it's their ability to come home at night and feel safe. So for us to feel good as a society, we need to participate.
Finding homes and jobs for homeless people is not enough without rebuilding communities that have been undermined by lack of investment, crumbling infrastructure, poor schools, drugs, and hopelessness. Helen Brown is a Project Home staff member at St. Elizabeth's Community Center in North Philadelphia and a neighbor.
Since I've been here, I've seen the good times, the bad times, the in-between, and it really went into a drastic change. I think was in the 60s or early 70s when the industry started moving out. That's where we got all the abandoned houses. At St. Elizabeth here at Project Home, we have ceramic classes, we have GED classes here. We have the after-school program for kids. We have a drill team, which was 30 kids. They're from ages 6 to 14. In the last 3 years, since Project Home has been here, we have now started to rehab vacant houses, turn trash lots into beautiful gardens.
Right now you're walking down Judson Street, and Judson Street currently is about 86% vacant, and there's 2 phases of development that we're planning on this block. The first phase is housing, and there's 30 units, and that'll be primarily on this side of the block, spanning all the way to the first occupied house down there. And then the second phase of development is a family learning center.
The Philadelphia plan started in 1995 as a joint effort of city and state government, nonprofit agencies, community groups, and neighborhood residents to revitalize communities. Suzanne Horan is part of the team implementing the Philadelphia plan for Project Home.
Project Home interprets the Philadelphia plan through a combination of housing development, open space development, program development, and job development.
Formerly homeless women and their children will live in these rehab townhomes. They're on Diamond Street in North Philadelphia and were developed under the leadership of Rena Rowan, Vice President of Jones, New York. Like other Project Home initiatives, this one took the collective efforts of many members of the larger community. Attending the dedication ceremony for the Rowan homes were neighbors, local dignitaries, and special supporters like actress Lily Tomlin.
And I congratulate you, Philadelphia. It's really extraordinary.
None of us are promised tomorrow, or today for that matter. Life is just so precious, and we all deserve fair chances in every aspect of life. Some of us don't know what poverty is. Some of us don't know what it is to need. It's time for people to take the blinders off. And it's time that we start extending what talents and skills that we have to one another and helping one another.
So, there are 2 million people who will experience homeless each year in the United States. Most of them are acutely homeless and will find some kind of housing within weeks or months. About 20 to 30% are chronically homeless, and in that group we find many folks who carry a diagnosis of schizophrenia, suffer with drug and alcohol addiction or untreated physical illness, or all of these. I wonder if some of you in the audience remember a time, as I do, when there weren't a lot of people living on the street. Yeah, okay, so I was going to do a little survey. It really is generational. Stop and think for a moment of the time you met your first homeless person, whether you saw the person sleeping on the street at night on a steam grate or someone approached you and said, I'm homeless and hungry. And try and think of how old you were. And let's say, were you an adult? Raise your hand if you were 18 or over when that experience happened. I was 27, okay. Raise your hand if you were a young, say 15 or younger. Yeah. Some of you young people are growing up thinking of it as kind of a normal urban phenomenon. And indeed, can you hear me in the back? I'm sorry. Just raise your hand if my voice drops. Yeah, so 2 million people are homeless. And there's an article in this week's New Yorker magazine that talks about the evolution of homelessness in that city. In 1964, some sociologists from a university went around the city to see if they could find people who were sleeping in the street, who were homeless. They found one person, one individual. That's 1964. Right now there are 50,000 people who are homeless in Manhattan. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. There is a lot of poverty there, as in any large city, but folks lived indoors. So the reason I'm bringing up this sort of demographic portion is I'm going to talk a little bit about my psychotherapy project with homeless people, but it would be incorrect to give the impression that homelessness is primarily a psychological problem. It is, above all, an economic problem. It is caused by the lack of affordable housing, because that's what changed. There have always been people struggling with mental illness and addiction and so forth, but as I say, it did not become an egregious problem until the 70s and really the 80s, after federal housing subsidies were slashed, mostly by President Reagan. That started the process. By up to 90%, those funds were slashed. So Philadelphia used to have one of the highest rates of homelessness in the nation, and as of today, we have one of the lowest. And the credit goes for that change to Project Home, to Sister Mary Scullion and her best friend Joan and all the people who have rallied round to help. What you didn't see in this film, although I think it's very moving and in many ways complete, is how they got started. So Sister Mary is a Sister of Mercy, and at age 25, she was simply outraged at the plight of the very poor in the world's wealthiest nation. And she had no funds, no programs, nothing. She just, with her best friend Joan, decided to occupy, I have to use that word, an abandoned building, semi-abandoned. It still had some plumbing that worked. And they moved in with, and they invited 50 homeless men to join them. They had only a little bit of canned soup, whatever they could afford as young women who were working as social workers, and a few blankets and conversation. And it's true that come spring they were evicted by the city, but at least for that one winter, nobody died of frostbite or drank antifreeze to get high or was burned sleeping on a steam grate. So as they were all filing out of the building, that April 1983 or 4, people came up to her and said, don't stop, we want to help. And they donated resources and time and money, and they taught them how to get grants. So we fast forward to 2013. Now this little makeshift project is called Project Home, as you see. It has an annual budget of $8 million. A lot of philanthropy, and some from celebrities, some from very generous donors in Philadelphia, but also state and federal and city funds. And so Project Home is now able to full-time employ 300 people, 300 folks from all walks of life, many of whom were once homeless themselves. And there are 3 successful businesses run exclusively by homeless people. You saw the Home Cafe and Our Daily Threads. And 95% of the people who come through Project Home never return to the streets. So because there is so much that was, it's a project that now attracts artists and lawyers and doctors. People want to get involved. And I started out in 1999 volunteering in the usual ways, serving food, driving in the outreach van. And I noticed that even in those very small interventions, I felt my skills, my training as a psychotherapist was helpful. So I started to wonder if psychotherapy could be something that would be welcomed by Sister Mary. So I approached her and said, you know, Sister, I'm a psychoanalyst. I have a private practice. I teach at Penn, and I got up the courage to say, could I bring long-term insight-oriented psychotherapy, which had helped me in my life with my traumas, could I bring it to Project Home? So she said, let's talk, because a lot of our people do suffer a lot of them are on medication. And I said, but there's something else, you know, and we talked about what is reparative about talking. What does it mean to use the phrase "a talking cure"? So I actually cited for her a passage from Scripture. She is a nun, but this happens to be from the Gnostic Gospels. Anyone heard of the Gnostic Gospels? Beautiful. So you may recognize this particular quote. It goes like this: if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. To me, that says better than anything. That expresses in a nutshell what talking therapy is about. It is about finding the words, being with someone who can listen without judgment, and having a witness who is not censorious and who really knows how to listen both to what is said and what is not said. So she said, but you said you're a psychoanalyst. And I said, yeah, that's actually what I want to bring to Project Home. And she said, you mean Freud? And so I said, actually I did, and was able to do a little bit of education there. And this is something that even other therapists don't know, is that Freud's original plan was that his work would be available to everybody. And in the 1910s and 20s, psychoanalysis was available to farmers and factory workers and chambermaids and the unemployed. So I even was able to tell her about this book by Elizabeth Danto called Freud's Free Clinics, Psychoanalysis and Social Justice, 1918 to 1938. And as I say, my teachers at the Psychoanalytic Institute seem to purvey the myth that indeed it's a shame, this work is very expensive, and it's for people who are well educated and like to reflect. Did you think that the people interviewed on the screen who had been homeless were non-reflective? I find them very insightful. I don't see that you have to be rich to afford an unconscious. On the contrary, sometimes I think, I wonder sometimes if having feeling entitled and having a lot of money allows people to become less reflective and less insightful. So it's just kind of backwards. And you may wonder what happened to why we don't know about these clinics. Well, the Nazis took over in 1936. They hated Freud's Jewish science, and they, eventually closed the clinics down. And so there's never been free treatment on such a large scale since then. And unfortunately, that whole glorious chapter in history of psychotherapy seems to have been erased. So that's one thing that I, as a teacher, like to do is remind people of that. So what we offer is, when Sister, she was pretty convinced by this, and she gave the green light. So I recruited 10 colleagues who were willing to work for free. And we do several things. We have one person who works strictly on the street with people who have not yet come indoors. See, there were a lot of names being mentioned. There's Women of Hope and St. Elizabeth. All of those are separate buildings within Project Home. Project Home is the umbrella name. There are now 14 buildings under Project Home that homeless people never have to leave. So this is the trend that I think everyone agrees is the solution to homelessness, and that is to be able to provide people permanent housing solutions. Shelters are probably still necessary, obviously, but that's not going to solve the problem. We need the political will, we need places that people can really settle into and feel are a home base. So in addition to places that folks never have to leave, the project also offers medical care, legal counseling, and educational opportunities. And so we also want to offer therapy. So Violet Little is a psychoanalyst who work strictly with folks who are still living outdoors, either because they're still on a waiting list or because they don't want, they're not ready, or they say, I don't do indoors, you know. You have to give up all your assumptions, I think, when you work with, when you do any kind of important, I think, social justice work. So some people really demonize the very poor, and they see homeless people as lazy and greedy and disorganized and kind the system. And there are other people who idealize homeless people, and they think they're just kind of, you know, angels in tattered clothes. Neither of those extremes is true, right? We find as much diversity in the population of people who live indoors as outdoors, is what I've learned. So Violet Little works with folks who are still living on the street, either as individuals or families. And in addition to being an analyst, she happens to be an ordained priest, so she has access to several of the churches. And she allows people to come in, and there are, you know, they can use the facilities, they can play games with their kids, there's food, there's some clothing available, and her motto is healing through hospitality. She gives them lots of information about possibilities for 12-step programs and ways to get on waiting lists for housing. But she is our woman still on the street. She does that 3 or 4 days a week and does very much some one-to-one counseling. Some people come in occasionally, some people come in 4 times a week to talk to Violet Little. And we have another therapist, Phyllis Strong, who has run a group for the children of Project Home 4 nights a week for 7 years. These are little ones who have grown up, you know, seeing much too much. Their cribs were broken down strollers, and they had mothers who didn't really look at them because no one had looked at and helped them when they were little. So these are kids who don't really know how to play. They're very deprived. And that group, 4 times a week, is probably the most social stability any of them has known. So those are 2 analysts. And the rest of us do something that's more easily recognizable as one-to-one therapy. And we help the residents, most of us, as I say, see folks who are already trying to live indoors at Project Home. And we help them set goals and get organized, yes, but we don't limit ourselves to that. We also talk about childhood traumas. We attend to the relationship between therapist and patient. That's called the transference. We interpret dreams. In other words, we go deep. And one thing that we found is that, you know, if you speak theoretically about homelessness, do you know, and are any of you therapists? Raise your hand. People, yeah. Have you heard of, do you know an analyst named Donald Winnicott? So he talked about helping patients form a holding environment, which is like the one that parents provide for children, which is you know, that atmosphere of safety and trust that allows you to, the true self, to come forward. Now he would say that the first home we ever inhabit is the mother's body. And usually we think of that environment as blissful. When we talk about returning to the womb, that means returning to nirvana, the blissful state where all your needs are taken care of. However, for people whose mothers were ill or abused, punched in the stomach, hungry, addicted to drugs, that first environment was a chamber of horrors. That first home was anything but blissful. So then when we leave the womb and we're in the arms of mothers and other caretakers, we learn how to exist in the second home, which is sort of in the world. And we come to feel that at home in our own skin. And that allows us to trust other people. And if you haven't had any of that, it's possible you will never see any space as inhabitable. Right? There's some people for whom those first early experiences are so ruinous, they experience their own body as a haunted house. And all enclosures seem dangerous, or at least suspect. And all relationships seem fraught with peril. So we as therapists try and approach homeless people knowing that the attempt to help someone who has never been cared for is a little bit like trying to hug somebody with a sunburn. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, I'm the sunburned person. You may feel full of love and you want to hug me, but get away, you're killing me. Yeah. So we try and balance the holding environment with this other concept of impingement, right? So again, back to this psychoanalytic term. If mother feeds the baby not when baby is hungry, but when she herself is anxious, the baby doesn't experience that as an easy nourishment, a good feed, but as something coming at him or her. The breast of the bottle is kind of overstimulating. And it's very easy in the therapy situation to try and offer too much encouragement, too much direction, too much hope. So it's a real therapy, it certainly is an art, and we try and keep that balance. And we think of therapy not in terms of months, but in terms of many years. So what has happened we've now been working 8 years, and we have some patients who almost haven't missed a session in that period of time. And yes, there are some folks who have gone back to their addictions, who drop out of therapy, who then come back. But we also have some folks who have used that experience of being trusted to move into their first romantic relationship, or the first stable one, to a job, a small job, but still employment, to doing breathtaking artwork, and to feeling at home for the first time. So we've learned a tremendous amount from doing this work, and there aren't any books that say how you do psychotherapy with homeless people, so it is very improvisational. And we're very excited that sometimes when I give talks like this, people in various communities will say, we want to get started. So we at IFA, that's, as Gay said, that's the title of the program, IFA, Insight for All. We at IFA love to share what we know, and if you are somewhere where you're trying to start such a program, we will do everything we can to help you get going. The group that has most successfully copied us is in New York City. It's called, I wanted them to call it IFA in New York, but they wanted their own title. So they call it Connect and Change. And they think of it more as homelessness prevention, because a point at which a lot of women become homeless is right when they're leaving a domestic violence shelter. It's in that time where they're not sure. Are they going home? Are they going to meet the perpetrator again? Are they going back with family who may or may not be supportive? That's a really vulnerable time. So the analysts at this group meet the women, sometimes at undisclosed locations, and they have had real great success too, working in depth for years at a time. So I just want to say that it's wonderful to be here. I very much look forward to this conversation, because none of us has the answer, and I'm sure that we can all learn a lot today from this dialogue. I hope that in addition to helping individuals and families, we can all think about working toward what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. referred to throughout his career as the beloved community. Thank you.
We're going to take us a 5-minute break so we can set up a panel, and you all can help yourselves more to the repast in the back. I want to encourage all of you to check out our resource tables in the back. United Way is here, and they are very involved with, the executive director is a co-chair of the Vermont Council on Food Council, correct? Hunger Council, sorry. Anyway, she is the co-chair of that council, and they have a lot of information about hunger in Vermont and how to be helpful. And also the Drop-In Center is posted in the back. They are looking for volunteers for their overflow shelter, which is opening up quite soon. I think, is it November 3rd? Yes, November 3rd, the overflow shelter is opening up, and they certainly need help there. So please take a look and enjoy yourself with refreshments, and also Deborah's books are on sale in the back corner. And I wanted to introduce our panel. I'm really, really grateful to these people who helped us not only think about this event, but also were willing to bring themselves here. I'm very grateful for that. And I would like to introduce Lucie Fortier, who is the Executive Director of the Drop-In Center here in Brattleboro. Next to her is Whitney Nichols, who's a member of the Brattleboro Retreats Consumer Advisory Council, also a member of the Drop-In Center Board. Vermont Coalition to End Homelessness, and the State Independent Living and State Rehabilitation Councils. Knowles Wentworth is the Community Outreach Program Coordinator for Healthcare and Rehabilitation Services here. And Joshua Davis is the Executive Director of Morningside Shelter. And we know Dr. Luepnitz. Hello. I'm going to take a seat, and the first thing I was going to do is just ask our panelists from Lucie, you didn't want to start first, so I'm going to I am going to ask Knowles if you would talk a little bit about what you do, but also how this, what you've heard so far and seen so far, how that resonates for you, and just give us your reactions to it.
Sure. So this community outreach program with HCRS was basically started about a year ago, right after the Irene floods and some of the state money that came into community mental health centers to address, because of the Vermont State Hospital flooding. They felt like it was important to address more issues in the community. And so this program that I coordinate in Brattleboro was given birth to in August of last year. And so informally, I was at Morningside for a few years when I came to Brattleboro to study at SIT about 6 or 7 years ago. So as far as the film, I'm kind of an on-the-fly guy. So what I mean by that is I didn't take any notes on things that necessarily resonated with me in the moment. So I'm going off the cuff here. I'm trying to draw some parallels between the population. Oh, I should mention too, I'm also on the crisis team with HCRS. I've been doing that for about 3 years. So I see a lot of folks come through the ER. My shift is midnight to 8, 3 days a week. And so I see a lot of folks come through the ER who find themselves homeless. And I'm trying to draw parallels between the film and the need for such homes here in Brattleboro with the comprehensive services that they have down in Philly. What my latest thinking around this has been the need for almost a real full spectrum of solutions, ranging from group homes that really allow people to do anything and everything, expecting that there'll be police involvement. There'll be people, using drugs and alcohol. There may be violence. That's on one end of the spectrum. And because those folks, actually, frankly, those are the ones that I see most. They might have, that might be the folks that Brat PD sees a lot. But these folks find themselves homeless as well, and these are definitely the folks who are having a hell of a time getting into any housing. So that's one end of the spectrum, and then the very end of this, the other end of the spectrum, of course, is this idea that we've been tossing around at these local continuum of care meetings, which is to provide some measure of subsidy for individuals depending on need. That might range for, say, 6 to 12 months. It might be a big subsidy up front, and then be titrated out so that as folks get on their own. And then there's a bunch of things in between, but I really don't want to take too much time as one individual, one panel member with so many folks in the audience. So I think that's what I'd say regarding how the film resonated with me in conjunction with what's going on in Brattleboro.
Hi, yes. What resonated for me, I think most, was giving back to some of what I've received. And so it's a great opportunity for me to be here this afternoon or this evening to talk to people about how you can actually see a real life person who's experienced homelessness. I formerly was an employee here at the Retreat, in fact, as a teacher in the school for about 10 years. And I think the other point I'd like to make is that housing first is really the most important notion that once you find housing, then you can begin to, when you have shelter, then you begin to take care of some of these other personal issues that when you're in crisis, you are not able to take care of.
Sure. I definitely sit in a position where I get to see a number of folks on a daily basis that are struggling with housing and homelessness. So speaking from that point of view, I think two things resonated with me. Number one, when we talk about what the issue is, it's not about the individuals, it's about affordable housing. And so that really stuck out with me. And there's a lot of parallels that between Philadelphia and Brattleboro. We see the same things here. And the other thing was they gave the recipe. I think in my scattered notes here, education, jobs, housing, healthcare. These are the things that we can work on as a community. And so it's less about do we have the shelters and talking about shelter numbers, but what about the periphery of, again, education, jobs, housing, healthcare. So that's what really stuck out with me.
At the drop-in center, we are a day shelter, but we also do an emergency shelter in the wintertime. So a lot of the things that that was my thought too was what Josh just said about the education, jobs, housing, and healthcare. We see that a lot. Folks can't get the self-esteem that they need if they don't have a house. If they're going from place to place every night, we see a lot of people that are couch surfing right now. So when the shelter opens, yes, they have a place to go every night, but that's not our solution. That's just a Band-Aid. We need to have more projects or more affordable housing. But I think if we had projects on the idea of Philadelphia, that could be a big plus for us.
I wanted to ask, hello. I wanted to ask if the audience had questions, comments, observations that they wanted to make and to the panel. Yes, sir.
Hi. Okay. Hi. My name is Tom, and I came into town in January, and haven't never been here before. And I came into town on a train to the retreat for addiction services. And having never been here before, was scared, didn't know where I was. I was told that out of the 20 small towns in the country, this was the 11th best. And so I said, well, that'll work. And when I was on the train from Central Vermont, from another shelter to help my problem, I was told to call when I'm on my way, and I did. And I said, I'm on my way to the retreat. I was told that you're going to help me with the situation that I need to take care of. And they said, I'm sorry you were misinformed. Your paperwork is pending. And we didn't know what was going on, but when you get off the train, call a local shelter, call the Morningside Shelter, and they will help you. And so I got off the train with all my stuff, and the shelter said, I'm sorry you were misinformed. There's a waiting list, a long waiting list. And depending upon your situation, we can help you the best way that we can, when we can. So I went to the overflow shelter at the Baptist Church and slept on the floor. And they said I could store all my stuff that I brought there. And they said, I'm sorry you were misinformed. You can't store your stuff here, so talk to this church and talk to that agency. And I found that I went to different agencies around town, and everyone told me, I'm sorry you're misinformed. And it seemed like not every agency in town knew what the other agencies did or what services they could offer. And I said, well, maybe the heads of the different agencies could meet once a month, and they would know who to help and how to help them, and make sure clients abuse the services that were offered, and the ones that it worked for them, that would work, and they said, oh, great idea. Hopefully down the line, the different agencies would meet and they would talk. I've talked to pretty much everyone on the board here, in different levels. I've been at the Morningside Shelter the last couple of weeks, helping me with my situation, and as of tonight, because of their constraints and their requirements to help people there, as of tonight, I'm again homeless. So that's a thing I have to deal with. But I put myself there, so you have to have the oomph to get yourself out of your situation. So it will work out. But the drop-in center, Lucie has helped me in the past when I came into town in February and March, and so things in general worked out. But I had to do some pounding the pavement to get to find out who did what. And the networking in regards to different agencies, I think, is very important, because you get someone who just comes into town and they don't know where they are, and they find out, or they hear that it's the 11th best out of 20. And great people. And, catering was my thing, and a lot of restaurants were here, but the people who told me about that were here 5, 6 years ago, and they didn't know that a lot of restaurants closed.
Tom, I'm wondering if we could put that question back to the panel about what you're saying about it. Sorry, I was misinformed.
Sure, yeah. So anyway, it took me a long time to network and find out my answers, but it took a long time of pounding the pavement to do that. And just someone coming into town, and they hit that wall, and it seems to be a problem with a lot of people.
That's an excellent point. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to Tom and Whitney, and at least one of the, I'm sorry, what's your name? The singer?
Oh, Morningstar.
Morningstar. Have identified themselves in this room as formerly homeless, and there are probably others as well. And that was, and when I started my remarks, I think I was speaking, as I often do, to teachers, and as though we all live indoors and we're talking about them. So thank you very much. I feel humbled and enlightened by what you're saying. Because the really important thing is to remember that each one of us is just one hurricane or catastrophic illness away from destitution, and and we're all searching for a sense of home, no matter who we are. That's something that we have to find and create every day. So there's no us and them. In terms of agencies networking with each other, absolutely, that's essential, and maybe some of the people who are locals can speak more to that. Can anybody here help Tom?
I would like to just respond to Tom. Thank you. I experienced similar difficulties, and there were contradictions and distance centers among different programs, from HUD to Social Security to Medicare, Medicaid, and not only that, it's more locally, and it's very, very difficult. And I think we all have something to give, and what I'm trying to do is to give back and make people aware that there are some things that are just not right.
Thanks for being here, Tom.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for showing up. I would, I definitely back Tom up on what he's saying. The system is so complex where we work in silos. Things change fast. Things come down fast from the state. We have new programs in place, more restrictions. I have a master's degree, and it's hard for me to understand exactly the complexity of the system and what's going on. So I definitely, I could definitely back Tom up on that. And I think, even those service providers do talk to one another often, we don't get into the nitty-gritty of exactly what services we offer, and ensure that when people are making their way from one agency to another, they're getting the services that they need. So when Tom leaves Morningside, we don't necessarily ensure that HCRS is gonna pick it up or whoever. So.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I was wondering what kind of questions were going to be asked in the panel, because I was just telling Josh a few minutes ago that I had intended to set up this skit a few days prior with Josh, where I would be the individual going through the system, and he was going to be the service providers. To answer questions that way, just using drama. And sorry, we never got that together in time.
Since I have been homeless for 20 years now, although I've never been as homeless as I am in Brattleboro, because I had a cabin here, I would get respite at 2 months a year. But I no longer have it, so I've been on the streets here. First of all, I have to say your drop-in center is absolutely amazing. Yep. The best place I've been in the entire country, and I've been serviced by 12 different states. Because Lucie makes sure that it's almost a family atmosphere.
Yep.
But having said that, I would like to say, in a group of a psychiatric setting, that I believe that role-playing and behavioral therapy would be most beneficial in this town. And I say that because I've seen people that do not seem to be able to resolve conflict on any level. So that if you put them in a house with their neighbors, there will certainly be police involvement. And then you get into the criminal justice system. So that's my suggestion, and I wonder if you toss it around. Role-playing is fabulous. Some folks that I've met, and I've had conversations with about 60 homeless individuals now. They want to tell their story, but it involves a lot of conflict that they just do not know how to resolve.
Morning, so have you been involved in role play?
Yes, I've had wonderful. Anger management. Role-playing was what did the key for me. But because I'm a trained opera singer, when you're working on an opera, role-playing is key. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if it's fine if we want to keep asking the panel, but also questions to the group as well.
Yes.
Well, my question is concerning a study they did in Philadelphia. Apparently in Philadelphia, they estimate it costs between $35,000 and $150,000 a year to service a homeless person through the different emergency responses and stuff like that. Is there any kind of figures for what the service costs the city, the state, to service a homeless person in either Brattleboro or in the top state of Vermont?
And so we were talking about this before, is that through the motels. I know in the state of Vermont last year we spent $1.5 million on motel stays. That's emergency motel. That's not including figures of what's spent on shelters, hospital stays, emergency rooms. No, it's millions and millions of dollars.
Do you know if there's any study at all?
Not that I know of.
That's probably Googleable. Can I say something to that? That recently the government shut down. You may have heard of that. And economists at Standard & Poor figure they have generated is that it costs $24 billion. Right? So I crunched some numbers, and that would give every chronically homeless person $60,000 in cash. Just that little stunt. And yet we're always told that there isn't enough money. There's just no more money to end homelessness.
Deborah, I was intrigued by how you framed the economics of your presentation, in the sense that especially during the Reagan presidency, up to 90% of housing subsidies were cut. And then later on you talked about how Project Home in Philadelphia now has a budget of $8 million, and that it has 300 some staff, and that a lot of the financial burden is being picked up by the nonprofit sector and by us as communities who need to, continually fund this important work. So my question is what do you as a panelist, and do us in this room, see as what's needed in terms of advocating not just for the dollars, but for the structural and systemic changes that need to happen in order to both quantify and qualify the need for both dollars and prioritization of these needs? And then that's open to everyone.
Yeah, to everybody too. I think a living wage is important. We talk about raising the minimum wage, but a living wage is what's essential. And every once in a while, someone like Barbara Ehrenreich tries to live on the salary of someone who works at McDonald's. And she wrote a book called Nickel and Dimed, and it's impossible for her to live on that. I mean, the decisions you have to make and the things you have to do without is just not. And in most developed nations, there is such a thing as a living wage. So that would be my top priority. I guess we could say that the Democratic candidate for mayor in New York City has a plan. De Blasio is his name, and he's, I think, the presumptive winner in that. His plan is to build 200,000 units of affordable housing. nobody has said that for a while. Bloomberg has good intentions, but that really, under his administration, homelessness soared. So tell your New York friends to get out and vote, and we need to talk about the fact that the living wage is something that has to come to be.
I just add that a livable wage in Brattleboro, I'm sorry I can't give you the source, is $18.53 an hour. That's if you're going to spend 30% of your income on rent.
The rent, yeah.
And we know the minimum wage is $7.25. Thank you. Sheila.
Can someone just give us a picture of Brattleboro in terms of like numbers, how many homeless, and that kind of whole picture, so we know what we're kind of framing?
Last year at Morningside Shelter, we had about 120 people come through. A third of those were children under 18. We served families and individuals. And so I think the best way to do it, or the easiest way for me to do it, and I know Lucie, is to talk about the numbers served, because it's hard to quantify homeless. It's hard to get an accurate count on that. So,
at the emergency shelter last winter, we served 172 unduplicated people, and we had 43 women and I believe it was 7 or 8 children.
in the first quarter from July 1 to September 30th, we've had 150 households, unique households, call for services. We're able to get, so folks go on the wait list, and we're able to get about 13 to 15% of those people into the shelter.
In our first quarter this year, just at the drop-in center, we have seen 61 unduplicated homeless folks.
I've been at forums where people express concerns that the services that Brattleboro already offers and the prospect of offering more affordable housing is going to draw more people to this community and burden this community further. And while I'm on the other side of those concerns, wanting to support affordable housing, wanting to support services, I'm wondering what the representatives here say in response to those community concerns.
Yeah, I hear those concerns a lot as well. I will say, you know, we're a border town, and political lines are drawn, but people don't necessarily respect political lines. And I know a lot of people have an issue, Vermont money for Vermonters, but we track the last permanent zip code when folks come into the shelter, and last year 90% of the people that we served were Vermonters, with over 60% of those from the Brattleboro area. So, you know, if you build it, they'll come. I don't know. We haven't really built it, let's try. Hopefully they'll come, you know?
I think that's a convenient excuse for
Hello,
people to
being
not
one of the shelter people. Now, I know we were talking about numbers, about how many were in there. Now, how many were the same, like I've been in there 3 years in a row. How many numbers are there? The same people, I mean, in terms of, you said that there's housing available that's coming in, but is there enough?
Good question. To keep going, to keep.
Our duplication from year to year is relatively low. We don't have a ton of duplication from year to year. That being said, what's your success rate in terms of?
95% once you get into it.
We're not there.
I'd say in response to that question that you just asked, I used to really rail against that stereotype that you know we're attracting homeless people. Now I see the argument a little more balanced, because and believe me, let me state my bias. As a member of the crisis team, I do see folks in crisis, and I do see, I don't have a figure, but I do see a number of folks coming from many other towns across Vermont or Massachusetts, New York, other New England cities. And so they're not all homeless, but I do see a number of folks coming in and accessing the great services that we do have in this region.
I would say at the drop-in center last year, even the overflow, that probably a good 90% were Vermont residents. Very few were coming from out of state.
Yeah, can I follow up with the gentleman's comment over here about the Reagan administration? From what I gather, what I saw in this film was we have a tendency of relying on the government to solve all our problems. And what I saw these women do to start this program was to get two heads together and build it from the bottom up and not rely. And for me, I'm a person involved in a church, and locally, that's how we have tried to drive things home, is to keep it local, bring the people in locally in terms of bringing the financial piece in. The more we rely on the government, the worse off we're going to be, and I truly believe that. The more we get back to the local concept, we have farmers, we have our own clinicians, we've got them in our own little communities. Whether you go to one area and dump it all into Brattleboro and you get everybody to fund it there, or whether you try to break it out and do small communities. I live up in Wilmington. You know, I don't know what the answer is for that. You don't. An umbrella is always a better way, but I see all you up there, and I worry about us sitting here waiting for the money to come.
If you're not at the table, then you're probably on the menu.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, especially given the fact that we're coming out of the shutdown, year 2 of sequestration. The coffers were shaken bare last year. It's a scary prospect of what's going to happen this year if we just sit back and say, well, when's the money going to come? But I think it's at both ends. It's a local, and in talking to Sheila this afternoon, you know, how can we get some political will going? How can we push back and say, you know, this isn't right. We're not going to take this. It was great to see that footage in Philadelphia where they're at rallies. There's activism.
We have one of my favorite things about Project Home is the advocacy department, that it gives formerly homeless folks a voice in the political process. So here's a wonderful statistic. In any given presidential election, a larger percentage of formerly homeless people than non-homeless people cast a ballot. That's how hard formerly homeless folks have worked to register voters, and everybody within Project Home basically votes. There's a lot of lethargy on the part of the rest of the community, and it's not just at that level. At any big demonstration, we have Project Home folks marching. And did you remember Occupy Wall Street in 2011? So Occupy Philly was really a great success. It was just a thrilling success. Was there an Occupy Brattleboro? Well, the homeless folks, our homeless folks were really not only active and instrumental, they really had a lot of, they were a driving force, because when it came to making decisions about where to pitch the tents, I didn't know, you know. So I would have thought, you know, can we do it, should we do it in this garden or here on the pavement? I would have thought on the grass because it's softer. But people who had lived outdoors for years said, no, you pitch a tent on the cement, because when it rains, the cement will dry faster than the grass. So they had so much information, they knew what to expect from the police. Our police were absolutely wonderful. I think they were on our side. And it lasted for 2 glorious months. But I think it really, all the occupies really changed the national conversation. People were not talking so much about the gap between rich and poor before Occupy introduced that rubric of the 1% and the 99%. So, does anyone have a button that says Occupy Brattleboro? I'll trade you. If anyone has one, I'll mail you one.
I was wondering if the panelists could speak to how the police work with them, or they work with the police when it's necessary. Is it a good relationship, or is it, you know, a tenuous relationship?
Well, we seem to have a good relationship with them at the overflow. I know last year they were stopping by quite often, and I think their presence made it much easier for us to operate the overflow shelter last winter.
Yeah, I'd say too. I'd say this in front of Lieutenant Evans, or if you weren't here. But truly, our HCRS crisis team is going out on many calls with them now. In fact, anytime, I think it's a stipulation of Brat PD now, isn't it, Jeremy, that if there's anyone in the community experiencing distress, that the suggestion is that you call a member of the crisis team, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so we're working really well with them, and you know they're natural social workers to begin with,
Yep.
And so no, it's been a real good fit with HCRS and Brat PD.
Yay. Because it wasn't always true, you know. The homeless people have really feared the police, and there have been, of course, bad experiences too. But you know, we have to work together. Sheila.
So my name is Sheila Linton, and I just want to be really transparent in being here. So when I first got the PR for this event, I reached out to some people on the panel and some people who are in the audience right now, and was very disturbed at first of who I felt was on the plenary session, and really pleased to hear Whitney be here and speak as somebody who has been formerly homeless, and really happy to hear people in the audience who are homeless or formerly homeless speaking for being the experts in this situation, really. So I had a few comments that I wanted to say as I was listening. The first question you asked is, what is your reflections on the video? And the first thing I took away from what you said, and I think actually Dr. Jim Plum, was in the video, said an outward manifestation of other issues. And so when I really look at that, that's exactly what we do in our movement, which is the Put People First movement. I am part of a movement with the Vermont Workers Center where we are addressing exactly those issues of outward manifestations that include education, housing, jobs, and healthcare. That's exactly what we're doing. And we're shifting the paradigm, actually. And so part of me being here is to hear what people have to say, is also to network, and is also to get people involved and engaged and empowered to do something different than maybe the norm of what we've been doing, and to really just comment on a few things that I heard. So I wanted to dismay a myth of homelessness, and I think we've brought this up a little bit, but I want to make sure that people understand that couch surfing, intergenerational housing, not by choice, laying on somebody's couch is homelessness. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that there are all lots of forms of homelessness, and though we may temporarily have a roof over our head, we are still homeless. I also want to say that, Tom, I really appreciate you being here and saying what you said, but you said a quote that, but I put myself here, so I'll have to work with it. I want to really say that it's not your fault that you're here. It's not your fault that you're homeless. It's not your fault if you have the disease of addiction. It's not your fault, because there are societal and environmental determinants that have caused us to be under the stressors that we are and to make the choices that we make. So you are not alone, Tom, in your experiences. I also want to say to Morningstar,
Yes.
right? I'd love to hear you sing, first of all. And you were talking about people's stories and about bringing people's stories forward. And part of the main work that we do is allowing people to have their stories heard. The main work that I do is forming authentic relationships with people and bringing their stories to the forefront. And we actually have a stories project, and I want to talk to you and all your friends, everyone, okay? So I would like to hook up with you, okay? And have your story publicized,
I'll
out
only share my
there,
story,
and be a part of the movement.
Anyone who ever tells me their story, it's mine. It's secret.
Exactly.
But I'll share mine.
And we're all interconnected and we're all interdependent amongst each other. And then I just want to say the comment, you didn't say your name back here, but about the government and depending on the government too much. So I agree and disagree. So the problem is that we're not holding our government accountable. And if you've been following the government and what's been happening, currently with our Put People First movement, we have what we call People's Budget. And within this, it's about holding our government accountable to actually what the state statute says, paraphrasing, is to advance the equity and dignity of people in the state of Vermont. Clearly cutting social services such as welfare caps, clearly homelessness, clearly all these things we are dealing with are not advancing the dignity of our state or our people. So it's not just about, okay, does government have too much control? It's about how is that government utilized? And it is the functioning of government to meet its people's needs. And we are not, or we're having trouble in holding our government accountable for doing those things. So I agree and disagree, because what I think we should be doing is actually holding our government accountable to meet those needs. We forgot what the purpose of government is. That's why we have these services, is because there are people who cannot meet their needs on their own. So I'd just like to say that being transparent, thank you. Thank you those for holding me accountable for our conversations we've had over the few days. And if you're wanting to get more involved and you have computer access, workercenter.org. And if you don't have computer access, see me at the end of the meeting and we'll figure out where you are and I'll meet you where you're at. Thank you.
Let's take this question. Hi, my name's Tina Borsa. I'm a homeless family interest and social worker. And I'm here with my colleagues. We are from over the other side, New Hampshire, Nadnock Regional School District. And I think one of the things I wanted to speak to was what Tom, you had said about being misinformed. We have often gone to meetings called the CNT, Community Networking Team Meetings in Keene. And one of the things that was really helpful when I went there is that I have a family I'm working with that lives in a cabin, and they can't get a positive reference to move out of that cabin that they're in. It's like a hotel motel, and they rent a cabin. And because I went there and there was somebody from the housing there, is it Southwestern Community Services, I found out that if they went to a Tenancy 101 class, they could get a positive reference. And so I'm in the process of signing them up. But otherwise, I would have never known that had we not come together. And we do that, is it monthly in the Keene area? And the other piece is what Sheila was saying. What we find in being in the school district, and I've only been working there since May, and this role that my boss has been in has been about 2 years, is that it's true. Homelessness is, we have a lot, the majority, the numbers we just ran that we reported back is doubled up, which is living with other family members. And that's the majority of what we have in our school district. And I'm wondering if there are other people here within the educational system, and what your experience is in working with the educational system around homelessness.
I want to thank, with tremendous gratitude, I have a lot of gratitude for our panelists, to Deborah Luepnitz, to everybody for coming out on a cold October evening, because I know that on a weeknight when I want to huddle home and knit, that I feel a lot of gratitude for people coming out. I want to encourage everybody to check out these tables at the United Way. Oh, Carmen wants to say something. Hold on one second.
I just want to make sure that everybody knows, and going back to Tom, you're pretty, and you did a great job drumming yesterday, by the way, at the other event. But if you are in a community in the state of Vermont, and actually in the state of New Hampshire and Massachusetts, and you need to know the resources that are available to your help, 211. You can call from any phone, including cell phones, and they will be the ones that can help you and direct you to certain organizations in your community. Thank you.
Thank you.
We definitely I don't work within the shelter. I work in housing support with folks that are living outside of the shelter for the most part, formerly or currently homeless. And so most of the people that I work with have children, and so we're trying to kind of constantly connect them with services specifically for the children or for the families that are offered, and kind of gathering the information about, parenting classes that are happening or different services or, early intervention services, and then getting those kids into it. It's definitely only a small percentage of the children that are facing the issues that you're seeing, because it's only the ones that we're specifically working with. And then likewise for the shelter, for the case managers in the shelter, they're working with the children that are within the shelter. And I know there's a pretty big push with Children's Integrated Services, which is a statewide program for early intervention. I know they work really hard towards trying to get into homes where there are at-risk children, but I don't know of anything that's really specific with. And each CRS has a lot of school-based clinicians and counselors, but I don't know that there's something really centralized and specific. Morningside and the Drop-In Center, we're trying really hard to open up the overflow shelter early this year versus after Thanksgiving. You all might notice that it's been getting really cold out. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if we have volunteers to staff it. So at the back table, there are sign-ups for volunteer. If you feel like you have any time available that you might be able to put in towards volunteering to staff that shelter, so we can get it opened up earlier and have a warm place for people to come when they have no place, when they have to sleep outside on the pavement, that would be great. It's back at the table before you leave.
Thank you. Took the words out of my mouth. Thank you so much. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, our panelists. Somebody is selling Deborah's book on the way out.
You know what? I can't believe I forgot all my cards. Like, I don't know what I was.
Oh, the sickness has made a mess of me. My eyes don't completely see. I fall asleep and those dreams take a hold of me. I forgot what I did yesterday.